Hello, thanks for joining us on the program. I'm Amarachi Ubani. Here's what's coming up within the half hour. Uncertainty clouds the next round of talks between Iran and the United States as Iran says it has no plans to attend talks in Pakistan. A father kills 7 of his children and another in a shooting in Louisiana, United States. Live. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer explains reasons he picked Peter Mandelson as ambassador to the United States. Let's begin the world today. Uncertainty rents the air as leaders are unsure when next the United States and Iran will sit at the table again to discuss conditions for a ceasefire after a brief period previously agreed ends this Wednesday. Iran says it has no plans for the next round of peace talks with the United States in Islamabad. Addressing reporters in Tehran, Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Ismail Baghei says the U.S. simultaneously with other diplomatic efforts and readiness for negotiations is undertaking actions. However, Washington does not in any way indicate seriousness in sticking to a diplomatic path. He stressed the United States had on 2 occasions within less than 9 months turned negotiations into a betrayal of diplomacy and severely violated the rights of nations. The U.S. says it will send a delegation to Pakistan headed by Vice President J.D. Vance. There is little clarity on the timing of any potential talks. The U.S.-Iran 2-week ceasefire is ending this Wednesday. While tension is still escalating in the Strait of Hormuz as U.S. forces attack and seize an Iranian-flagged cargo vessel. According to the United States Central Command, Marines launched a dramatic night operation from USS Tripoli, boarding and taking control of the ship after it allegedly ignored repeated warnings. The vessel, identified as the Tuska, was reportedly disabled by the USS Truance before being stormed by U.S. troops. President Donald Trump says the ship is under sanctions and now fully in American custody. Let's bring in our Washington correspondent, Maria Bird. Maria, what is happening right now in Washington as it becomes clearer Iran has no plans to sit at the same table with U.S. officials to renegotiate a ceasefire?
Yes, this is quite an interesting experience that we are currently under, as it appears as if there is going to be no plans as we thought previously, as the president has been asking for quite some time now. We specifically know that Pakistan was hoping to be able to be an intermediary for negotiations. And we know that this Wednesday deadline is coming up very quickly. So the question is really going to be around how President Trump plans to move forward. We know that this Strait of Hormuz is key and critical to the United States, and is key and critical to the globe as a whole. So it's going to definitely be a conversation between the State Department and also the president as to how they plan to move forward.
Yeah, but Maria, over the weekend, it had been very clear. Iran had said they will not be heading to Pakistan for these talks. But President Trump still insisting on sending J.D. Vance and the U.S. team of Steve Witkoff and his son-in-law to Pakistan. What exactly were they planning to go there to do?
So, the president is very clear on ensuring that the U.S.'s framework, the U.S.'s policies are moved forward. I do think that he believes that by sending these individuals, as you mentioned, it's a whole contingency of politicians and political leaders from the United States heading to Pakistan. And this could obviously, potentially, he's looking for some partnership from Pakistan and having some allies in the Middle East. And so that will likely be part of the plan. But we'll begin to see over the next few hours and definitely within the next 48 hours as to how the U.S. will respond.
The U.S. has responded in some way, attacking and seizing an Iranian cargo ship trying to get past its blockade of Iran's ports. What sort of advice is the Trump administration getting strategy-wise that indicates such actions will not be counterproductive?
Well, as you mentioned, the blockade and obviously the U.S. has continued to state that they, even though that we are in a point of ceasefire, that they were going to move forward in that direction, as you just mentioned. But the advice that the U.S. is receiving is one typically from the State Department. It's not much of the international community are providing the president with insight as to how in which he should move. As you know, the president has been a bit critical of NATO. He's also been asking for European allies. And so some of the advice, and so that's why I think this meeting that we are seeing with Pakistan is going to be so important, because there is hope that we could be seeing some conversations there, but also noting the close relationship with Israel and the U.S. and really how the U.S. has been very supportive of Israel in its stance and their position on this moving forward.
Do the actions of both sides, I mean, Iran insisting it will not be returning to the negotiating table, and then the United States enforcing its blockade on the Strait of Hormuz, do these actions, do they jeopardize the ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon?
It most definitely jeopardizes ceasefire. And the question is, if the ceasefire if we do expire on that time frame, are we going to see escalation? I think that there was much hope that the ceasefire would lead to geopolitical climate reduction, especially around oil prices, especially around the Strait of Hormuz being open, and especially around potentially not having any more major casualties. The U.S. does understand that the global community is asking for innocent lives to not be taken. That we know that there have been some accidental deaths that have occurred as it relates to airstrikes. And so the U.S. government and Congress specifically is asking that the president be very thoughtful in this regard. And so congressional members, the entire Congress is asking for and is very active as it relates to requesting that the president takes different actions and noting that the U.S. has been in long-term relationships with the Middle East and has understood some of the challenges and the potential need to have a reduction in the amount of conflict between the U.S. and Iran due to the nuclear pieces and due to some of what we are experiencing today.
Maria, just before you go, let's talk about the shooting in Louisiana that happened on Sunday. A father killed 7 of his children, another child in Shreveport. We'll be talking about that, more details on the story in just a moment. But what more do we know about this case?
What we know is this is another tragic case in the United States, just a call to action around mental health. We know that Americans have been suffering the pressures. Some of what we just discussed with U.S.-Iran Israel conflict has created some major economic challenges for many Americans, which have been long-standing, which predate this conflict. And the U.S. president had said before that he would be helping to address some of the economic challenges that many Americans are facing. And so what we know is that mental health has become a major area of concern. And I know we've discussed it before, is how is the U.S. planning to address this? Will the U.S. ever move to a place of banning guns in the United States? Because we can see here, this is another form of a mass shooting that unfortunately was let out by a man toward his wife, his children, and other loved ones. So this is a tragic incident.
Our correspondent in Washington, Maria Bird, bringing us up to speed on the cases in the United States. But Maria's just spoken about the father who killed 7 of his children in Shreveport, Louisiana, in a situation police have termed domestic disturbance. Officers say the shooting began at about 5 in the morning local time. After attacking the children at a property, the suspect drove away in a stolen car. 2 adult women, including the children's mother, are in critical condition after they, too, were hurt by gunfire. A 9th child was taken to hospital after jumping from the roof of the home while escaping. The suspect was later identified as Shamar Elkins. The victims, all minors, ranged in age from just 1 to 14.
I was called in because they said it was a crisis, but to come out find out domestic, it was a killing of 8 kids today, and 2 women are in the suspect is deceased. So heart racing. to have to bury 8 kids in the community. How do you even heal? How do you even start to heal? It's just so much on us. We need prayer. We need answers. We need counselors. We need therapists. It's a lot. It's hard.
Really, really tragic day. Probably one of the worst incidents in Shreveport history, where 8 innocent kids lost their lives, ranging from 1 to 14 years old. It's going to take a long time for this community to get back on its feet. Everybody is grieving. This was just a senseless act. Domestic violence is real. 33% of our homicides are attributed to domestic violence. Love should not hurt. If you're in a situation, we ask that you reach out to somebody, get some help, get some counseling, but definitely get out of the situation. We don't want it to turn deadly.
In diplomacy, a dozen Muslim-majority nations have condemned Israel's appointment of a diplomatic envoy to the breakaway region of Somaliland. A statement by Saudi Arabia's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, ministers from 12 governments, including Egypt, Turkey, Pakistan, and Kuwait, call the move a flagrant violation of Somalia's territorial integrity. Now, separately, the African Union has also denounced the decision, saying any unilateral recognition of the territory is null and void, warning that such actions risk undermining regional stability. Back in December, Israel officially recognized Somaliland as an independent state. It's the first and only country to do so, a move that provoked an immediate international backlash. On Wednesday, it announced Michael Lotham, Israel's former ambassador to Kenya, as its first envoy to the territory. And in the UK, Prime Minister Keir Starmer is facing fresh criticism over Peter Mandelson. Today, Starmer defended his decision to appoint Mandelson as ambassador, saying that he made a deliberate decision not to tell the officials made a deliberate decision not to tell him that Peter Mandelson had failed security vetting for the job of ambassador. Addressing members of Parliament today, the Prime Minister rejected suggestions that his desire to appoint Mandelson overrode security concerns, claiming that he would not have appointed Mandelson if he knew vetting had been denied. Meanwhile, Reform leader Nigel Farage took a swipe at the Prime Minister, saying it was unbelievable that Mr. Starmer was unaware that his pick for US ambassador had failed the vetting process.
And the Independent, came out very strongly to say he'd been told from sources inside that Mandelson had failed vetting. And in terms of the red flags, well, we already know that the Prime Minister did read a document about a Russian company that Peter Mandelson's company was directly engaged in, and actually a Russian company in which Mandelson himself was paid, was a director, and was a shareholder. So it's impossible for the Prime Minister to say that the warning lights weren't flashing. And if you were Prime Minister, and there were news reports last September that your ambassadorial choice had failed vetting, you would have thought perhaps he might have had some curiosity to try to find out whether this had really happened or not. I just find the whole thing totally incredible. Incredible. There is no way the Prime Minister couldn't have known. You telling me that everyone around him knew and he didn't know? Well, it's possible that he's just a puppet and never consulted on anything, but frankly, it isn't believable. And I do believe strongly that he misled the House of Commons, that he lied to the country, especially. He was so definitive in that Hastings speech that all the necessary channels had been gone through, that vetting had been assured. No, I think he's caught in a terrible trap. If there's a motion of no confidence put down, yes, we would support it, but it's not going to pass. The Labour backbenchers are not yet of a mood to get rid of their Prime Minister, although after May the 7th, they just might be. And, we're campaigning quite strongly around the country, saying vote reform, get Starmer out, and if they have the worst set of local election results, Welsh election results, Scottish election results in the history of the party, then that will certainly do for him.
We're off for the short break on the program. Still ahead. Japan warns of a powerful 7.4 magnitude earthquake issuing a tsunami warning in tow as it hits the northern region of the country. There you go. Welcome back. Pope Leo XIV continues his Africa tour in Angola, where he arrived on Saturday. Today, he traveled to the northwestern town of Sorimo, where he visited a nursing home. The Pope was welcomed with hymns, and he blessed the elderly, praying with them and distributing rosaries to residents and staff. The pontiff expressed his gratitude to the residents for their resilience, adding, "I will carry in my heart the memory of this meeting with you." The Pope is scheduled to lead thousands in prayer at the Sorimo Esplanade later in the day. Meanwhile, in Cameroon, where he left on Saturday, people have been reflecting on the impact of Pope Leo's visit to the country. For Eric Atcher, the executive director of the Africa Policy Forum in the UK, and Chris Anu, a journalist and founder of Africa Broadcasting Service, based in Houston, Texas, the Pope's visit afforded Cameroon the spotlight needed on the country's challenges. Both men shared their thoughts with me on Diplomatic Channel. Let's help us understand, how many, probably a percentage of people in Cameroon who are religious, who may have, probably understood the purpose of the visit and, probably the reason behind it and the significance of it.
Cameroon is quite religious. We have a significant population that are Catholics. We are talking of about 38% of the population are Catholics. Then you have the Muslim population, which is mostly in the north of the country. And then the other denominations, like the Pentecostals and so on. So in a nutshell, Cameroonians are quite religious. So when you saw that outpour of love, of welcome messages, embracing the Pope, it wasn't surprising to Cameroonians because they are used to this and this is what they all expected. And remember, Pope Leo is not the first Pope visiting Cameroon. In 1985, we had, I think, Pope John Paul II, who visited Cameroon twice. He was there in 1985. In 1995, he visited. And then we also had Pope Benedict visiting Cameroon in 2009. So Cameroonians are used to this atmosphere, and they know how to make good use of it.
So, Chris, I know that you have been championing the cause of the Anglophone part of Cameroon, the people who are where they have separatist ideologies and they want to stand on their own. Somehow you are sort of a spokesperson for these people, and I believe that Bamenda is a region that falls under this category. As Eric said, it's not the first time there's been a papal visit to Cameroon. What impact has that had on the country at all?
I think the impact was huge, not just to the country as a whole. I think Bamenda, the southern Cameroons, English-speaking Cameroon, the Pope has never been there. And for the first time, the Pope came to Bamenda, the southern Cameroons, where war has been embroiling for 10 years. The level of enthusiasm can be attributed to, number one, the fact that the people thought this is somebody who can speak for us. This is somebody who understands our plight. This is somebody who can speak truth to power, referring to Yaoundé. They felt that this is somebody who can carry their message without filters to the powers that be, not just in Yaoundé, but also across the globe. That accounts for the reason of the excitement. But also, the people have suffered a lot. For 10 years, people live almost locked home the rest of their lives. The economy has crumbled. Everything has crumbled. And they were hoping that the Pope will come and speak to them what he is capable of doing, seeing what he saw, talking about bringing the conflict to an end.
You can watch more of Eric Atcher, the Executive Director of the Africa Policy Forum, and Chris Anu, founder of Africa Broadcasting Service. You can watch both interviews On Diplomatic Channel, it airs tonight at 8:30 p.m. on Sky 515 if you're in the UK, and at 11:30 p.m. on DSTV right here on Channels Television. A deadly explosion has rocked Tamil Nadu in India, leaving at least 25 people dead at a firecracker factory. A blast tore through a facility in Vindruhanagar, reducing parts of the building to rubble as workers were caught inside. Authorities say the factory was not supposed to be operating, raising serious questions about safety violations. Investigation is now underway, with the owner and foreman reportedly on the run. More than 1,000 homes have been destroyed and thousands of residents have been forced to flee overnight after a major fire swept through Kampung Bahagia, a floating village in Sandakan on Malaysia's Borneo Island. Reports say most residents were caught off guard when the fire broke out at night, leaving them no time to gather their belongings before escaping. According to local media, up to 9,000 people are believed to have been displaced after the fire destroyed more than 1,000 of the village's 1,200 homes. The fire was brought under control after strong winds of closely packed wooden houses complicated firefighting efforts. Malaysia's Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim has expressed his condolences to the fire victims, adding that no casualties have been reported. He did stress the federal government is working with local authorities in Sabah to provide aid and temporary shelter to those affected as quickly as possible. Japan is warning about a tsunami after a powerful 7.4 magnitude earthquake hit the northern region of the country. The Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi urges residents to evacuate from areas where tsunami warnings have been issued following that earthquake. According to her, an earthquake occurred with its epicenter off the coast of Sanriku, and strong shaking with a maximum seismic intensity of lower 5 was observed in Aomori Prefecture. To everyone in the areas under tsunami warnings, please evacuate immediately to higher ground or safe locations such as evacuation buildings. Takaichi reported that human and material damage is still being confirmed, adding detailed reports will be received and announced later. With Aomori and Iwate prefectures hit by the quake and seismic activity felt in Tokyo, the Japanese Meteorological Region or Agency has issued those warnings of tsunami, admitting the possibility of the waves going up to 3 meters might occur. New Zealand has declared a state of emergency in the capital city, Wellington, as torrential rain and flash floods drench the country's northern island. Local authorities report Wellington received a record 77 millimeters of rain in less than an hour today, advising residents to hunker down. Rain forecasts for the next day, and half of the flights have been cancelled as well at Wellington Airport. Several schools have shut their campuses. More than a dozen people have been evacuated. A 6-year-old man in the Karori suburb has been declared missing. No fatalities have been reported, but flash floods come less than a week after Cyclone Venus swept through the northern island last weekend. Researchers over the years have shown that climate change has made extreme weather events, including floods, more common and intense around the world. We'll be ending with another weather report. In Indonesia, flooding has swept through homes in East Jakarta's Kebon Pala. After heavy rainfall upstream caused the Siliwang River to overflow, with water levels rising above 2 meters and disrupting daily life. Residents are demanding longer-term solutions, including relocation from flood-prone riverbanks. Authorities have begun evacuations. They're monitoring the situation as heavy rains continue. The city's disaster agency has warned of potential coastal flooding from April 17 to the 23rd due to high tides. Indonesia's Meteorology, Climatology, and Geophysics Agency says extreme weather is linked to the seasonal Pancaroba transition period, which brings unstable atmospheric conditions. That's it on the world today. Thanks for watching. I'm Amarachi Ubari. We'd like to inform our viewers on the DSTV platform. Coming up in place of sports news is Spotlight on Nigerian Army, a documentary series showcasing operational successes, welfare initiative, and strategic leadership in the Nigerian Army. Just for our viewers on the DSTV platform.